Let's talk about how you met grandfather and how that all worked.
Well, did I mention before that we had moved into a new neighborhood?
Yep, you talked about the new neighborhood, so tell us about the new neighborhood and stuff.
Okay. So I mentioned earlier that we moved into a new neighborhood when my father came home from the service, and it was a residential section, and it was a new section, so that nobody really knew anybody else. So one day, I used to do a lot of roller skating, and one day my girlfriend and I were up in my room because we were resting because we were going to go roller skating. And I heard my mother talking to somebody, and so when she shut the door downstairs, we got up and looked out the window to see who she'd been talking to, because the neighbors just didn't circulate around the neighborhood. Nobody knew anybody. So we looked out the window, and there was this fellow all dressed up in a blue suit. Of course, we just saw the back of him. He had blonde hair, and he was walking out the walk. And so we scrambled downstairs and said, "Who is that?" And she said, "Well, he lives across the street." And the street was a big, I don't know what you call it.
Cul-de-sac?
We lived on the top of a hill, and there was a big sweeping street that went over to houses at the bottom, at the lower level. And she said, "He lives over across the street." He knocked on the door and he said, "I don't mean to sound audacious, but I'd like to meet your daughter." And she said, "Well, do you know her name?" And he said, "No." She said, "Well, her name is Helen, and she's upstairs resting." And so he said, "Well, I'll call later then." So he did. He called later. I didn't know who it was, and I didn't really care. And so we made arrangements. He would come over. This was a weekend. He would come over the next weekend after church on Sunday, and we would meet him. I would meet him. So that's what happened. He came over after church on Sunday. He met my mother and my father, and that was it. We started dating. He was with the FBI at that point, and he decided he wanted to go back to school and finish his degree in electrical engineering. And so he gave up the FBI.
And how old were you guys at this point when you guys met?
I was 20 and he was 24. We just clicked. And he asked me to go to an FBI dance. And then he said afterwards, he thought, "Oh, I don't even know if she can dance." Well, we danced the same way. We had the same rhythm, it was just great. I mean, it just was wonderful. And so we were together as much as we could be every night, because he had a job at the Bureau of Standards where they would let him go back and forth to school to take classes during the day. And then I guess he had some night classes. And so he'd come over and have dinner with us almost every night. I'd say to my mother, "Mom, do you have enough for Bill to have dinner with us?" And so about every night he ate dinner with us. So it moved along. The romance moved along pretty swift. I met him in September. He asked me to marry him in November. He gave me my ring in December. And 6 months later, we were married in June. And his family didn't know what happened. His mother was a little shook up that he was marrying a floozy from Washington, D.C., I think. And she didn't even want to meet me. But she did meet me, and he had made up his mind that he was marrying me, so it didn't make much difference what his mother thought. And so he graduated from George Washington University with his degree. They interviewed on campus DuPont and General Electric, and he came home and said, "Whoever sent him a letter with the best offer. That's where he was going to go. So I was praying it would be DuPont, but it wasn't. It was General Electric.
And DuPont was in Washington, is that?
DuPont was in Washington.
And did you guys live in Washington when you guys got married and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where did you guys live when you
We lived at my house for 10 months because we asked Mom and Dad if we could stay there to save up money to buy our furniture. And the president of the bank had an inn with this Hamilton Gardens, which was right close by. And so he got us a 1-bedroom apartment at Hamilton Gardens. And in 10 months, we had saved up enough money to get our furniture. So we went out and bought all our furniture at the same time, same day. And so then we moved into our own place, which was an apartment.
Mm-hmm. So then how much longer was he in school for all that stuff?
He was still in school for like 3 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So did he get his master's then?
No, he started to, but we were in Pittsfield at the time, and he was going to Rensselaer, I believe it was, to get his master's. And he went for just a few weeks, and it was too hard, the snow, and he would go after work, and it was just...
So did he start college later then? So did he start pretty much on the same time you guys met then, with college and stuff, or?
Well, they had sent him, the Navy had sent him. The Navy apparently had something in mind, and they sent him to Cornell, Columbia, and Dartmouth universities.
And how old was he? Like, so right after high school, he went into the military then?
He went into the military when he was 17. He was in for 5 years. He was on the ocean for 2 years. And then for 3 years, I guess they sent him to school. But when he transferred to George Washington, what they were getting for him in the Navy didn't transfer. So he had to really start over almost. So it took about 3 years, yeah. So we were on the GI Bill, and he was working at Bureau of Standards and getting a paycheck.
So what did he do there? Was it fingerprinting? Is that what it was?
No, that was FBI. I don't know what he did at the Bureau of Standards. I really don't know. I don't know what the Bureau of Standards really does.
So, but the FBI, he did fingerprinting though, right?
Yeah, he searched fingerprints. Yeah, for the bad guys.
So what happened at that? So then he took the job with GE, and then what happened?
Well, that was, let's see, when did he graduate, leave?
53, was it? 1953?
And you were born in 51?
51.
Well, you were 13 months old when he got his letter from General Electric, and his first assignment was Pittsfield. And Leif was 13 months old, because at that point I was also carrying Eric.
So it must have been 52 then.
And, yeah. And so he went ahead of me by 2 weeks. I mean, I was like, everything happened so fast. He was to report and he used to report, and he was gone in 2 weeks. And I was there. I didn't know what had happened to me. But anyhow, we moved to Pittsfield, and I gave him all directions of what I wanted. I wanted a house with 3 bedrooms. I wanted a kitchen set. Told him what I wanted in the kitchen set. Told him I wanted a living room and a couple bathrooms. And I wanted a yard for Leif to be able to play in. And I wanted porches. He went up and he got everything I wanted. It was the second floor of this big old house in Pittsfield. And the people were very nice. We had 3 bedrooms.
So did you guys rent?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
For 6 months. And then we heard about these houses on Meadowview Drive on the outside of Pittsfield. It was Pittsfield, but still the outlying section. So we went and looked at the house, and we bought the house. And then we moved.
So so then at this point, so Eric was born around that point, and so tell me about kind of.
Eric was born in Pittsfield. He was born in Pittsfield. I was probably 6 months or more along with him when he and Leaf and I flew to Pittsfield. Mm-hmm. And Bill met us up there. And Eric, when in those days you stayed in the hospital 7 days. And so I was in the hospital with Eric 7 days and brought him home, and overnight he was screaming and carrying on and was clawing his face. And so the next day I called the doctor. Now the doctor in Washington graduated with the doctor he sent me to in Pittsfield. And so they knew each other. And over the phone he said, I'm coming down. I'm coming down right away. So he came down.
To your house?
And he had...
to the house?
He had impetigo. So he said, I'm sending a nurse in every day to give him a shot, because he said before penicillin, he would have died. It was infection. It just took over. It was under his, any place that was closed up, under his arms, in between his legs. I mean, it was terrible. And then the first time, she was a wonderful black lady. She came, she says, what did I do that, because his little rump was only about that wide. What did I do that the Lord made me deserve to give this child this shot? The needle was so long, you know. Oh my goodness. So then that cleared up. And so then, like I say, we moved out to Meadowview Drive, made friends out there, and were there for 6 years.
So what happened, when was Dana born then at that point?
Well, the three of them were born in 3.5 years. So Dana was born at the house that we bought first. And then we got in, we had gone to Greenmead's farm to an auction. They had started the year before, and we didn't go the year before. They had this was the second year. They were having an auction, and the colleges and privately people were sending horses into auction.
Yeah, so like UVM, UNH, UMass, UConn, all those schools.
So Troubadour was from University of Connecticut, and Walter Mulvihill was the one that brought him through. And we were late getting there because somebody had hit us in the back in the car, and a kid. And so we were late getting there. So the horses were here, and we were here on the grass. And the auctioneer said, I think this fella down here is trying to get acquainted with me. And I looked, and it was Bill. And he said, somebody's going to get a nice horse. I said, why don't you get him? So we got him. We had nothing. We had no trailer. We had no leather.
So did he know anything about horses at that point?
Well, he had been on the riding team at Dartmouth, but he was a farm boy. He was
horses on the farm.
Yeah.
He was like Eric. You know, he would hop on the farm horses and ride them. And so he liked horses. And the farm vet, we found out afterwards, was a Morgan owner. Well, that's what we bought, was a Morgan 6-month-old weanling stud. And then that snowballed. The first year we went to Vermont and got a lady from Emerald's Top Lady, her name was, and we got her from Mary Lou. What was
her son?
Here's Tim. It's her son.
Tim Johnson and Johnson.
Trains now, her son does?
Yeah, Tim.
Tim. Oh, jeez.
Morell.
The Morells.
Right.
Moreland Farm.
So we went to the Morells, How we got there, I don't really remember, but we wanted to buy Tim's horse, because it was a trained horse. And she said that she didn't feel that she should take Tim's horse away because he was winning, doing a lot of winning, and he liked the horse. So we picked out Lady. Lady was in foal with Feetop. Our farm name was just an odd Feetop.
What'd you say?
The stud she was bred to was Lippet Jeep. He was out in Illinois.
Yeah.
Dobbins, I think, was the name. Mary Lou Dobbins or something like that.
Well, I mean the horse.
Out in Illinois, yeah.
Was Lippet
So
Jeep.
they had gotten a lady, Emerald Stop Lady, from Illinois themselves. And so she wanted us to buy a Lady. So then we said we would, because she was in foal.
2 for 1.
Yeah, right.
Where'd you guys, all right, so continue. I'll ask you another question after.
So we had cruised around after the auction, and we had one horse. We cruised around to every barn, because there were a lot of barns around Dalton where we lived, and a lot of old houses that had barns, and we were knocking on doors that afternoon, asking people if we could put a horse in their barn. And finally, after we had just about dried up, Lee said, well, my scout master has a barn. So it was really close, really close. If you could have walked it, you'd have been there in 5 minutes. But you had to take the car and go down and around. It was a point.
So how old was Dad at that point then? He must have been old enough to, like 6 maybe? How old was he? How old were the kids when you guys got into the horses?
Well, they were little.
1959.
So I was 8.
They were little. They weren't very big.
Yeah.
The first year we got a pair of ponies, Emerald's Top Lady, she foaled. That's 4 horses. Then we had the studs. So in a year's time we had 5 horses. So we knocked on this family's door and asked them if we could put a horse in their barn. And John, the husband, was there, and he said, well, we've had animals in the barn before. Yeah, you can. So Dad leased the barn and 7 acres. And so we started putting, and we started collecting.
We only had Troubadour when was at first at Traeger's, and then after he had the barn, then he got Lady, and then he got the ponies.
Well, and Mary Lou didn't want us to take the pony, or to take Lady then. She said, well, you know, you can have Tim's horse. I guess they got talking, and they thought it was more of an advantage to have Lady, who her breeding and the fact that she was in foal was more important to them. But we said no. And we went up and picked her up within 2 weeks, and she said, you were afraid we weren't going to let you have her because you made arrangements and you got up here in 2 weeks. And we did. We got up there in 2 weeks and brought her down. And she was a kind mare. She was a sweet mare. But she didn't want nothing to do with training.
Yeah.
Bill tried to train her, and she would just sweat right down. She just couldn't take it. So we just left her to breed. At that point,
I rode her in hunts. She was broke to saddle.
Yeah.
I used to ride her in the hunts when we moved to Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
at that point we had moved and we were in Dalton for 4 years. And then that's when Dad got involved with rockets and astronauts and all that stuff, with guidance.
Mm-hmm.
So then we were transferred. Well, they asked those same 50 men if they would go to Scranton and open up, I don't know what they were going to open up, a plant, but what it was going to be, I don't know, I don't remember, I don't know what it was. I don't. So I said to Bill, I was happy where I was finally. I said, I'm not going to Scranton. Now, Bill's folks were not too far out of Scranton.
45 miles.
Yeah, I was going to say about an hour out of Scranton they were.
Or Wayne County.
So we went down. I did finally go down. And we found the farm that we moved on. I loved that place. As soon as I drove in, I said to your father, to your grandfather, buy this for me and I'll be happy here. And he bought it, and we were happy there.
What was the address of that farm?
What was the address? Dalton, Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. What was the
The
address?
mailman said to me, you're,
RD2, Dalton, Pennsylvania. That was all it was.
What was it?
RD2, Rural Delivery 2, Route 2, Dalton, Pennsylvania. RD2.
Huh. So Dalton, Mass. to Dalton, Pennsylvania?
yeah, and the mailman said to me, you're going to do this to me? I said, we're only changing the state. We're not changing Dalton. We lived in Dalton, we moved to Dalton, which is kind of unusual, I guess. So then we were there for about 10 years, and we had a lot of friends come and stay.
Yeah, tell me about that place, kind of, in a little bit.
The farm was 6 acres, and then it had another building out away, which never served us very much, never served Fordham's very much, I don't think. It had Dutch door stalls, it had a tack room, it had a 2-stall with sliding door gates where the troubadour and lady were housed, and then there was a little building there that he put, I think it was 3 straight stalls in, and the ponies and what have you, the smaller horses were in there. And then every year we had a foal, and we were showing at Northampton, we were showing at the Mid-Atlantic shows, having a ball. Not winning greatly, but winning. We'd come home with a ribbon usually, and made a lot of friends. Dad was on the board of directors the whole time we were there.
For Mid-Atlantic, right?
Yeah, Mid-Atlantic.
For Mid-A?
Yeah, the Mid-A, yeah. And
So what kind of, so tell me a little bit about it was a mare you guys shipped over to England and stuff like that, right? Who was that? What mare was that? Didn't you ship a horse over to England at one point?
we sold the horses to, well, we went to a horse show and the fellow wanted a horse. And he wanted our horse. She was fairly young. And so we sold her. Well, he says, do you have another one like that? And well, we did. We had a matched pair. So he wanted the other one. Well, then his son.
No, that's another story.
Well,
He's talking about Genesis going to England.
Genesis didn't go to England. I'm telling the story. Genesis didn't
One of
go.
them went to England. Okay.
We sold the horses to these people, and their son, they were trained horses at this point, was abusing them. He was abusing their mouth, and he was tough on them. So they ended up selling those two horses to England. So they're the ones that sold them, but they were our stock that went to England.
So what horses were they again?
I don't know which ones they were.
Was it Genesis, like Dad said, or no?
No, it wasn't Genesis. Johnny Lydon bought Genesis. Johnny Lydon bought Genesis. I was in the ring. Bill and I were in the ring showing her in hands. And they moved Genesis up above Johnny. He didn't like it. And then he came and bought her because he was training over at Mary's.
So Mary DeWitt's.
At
What
Mary.
was the name of that farm?
There's another farm, the same name, at Stonecroft.
Stonecroft, okay. And so, what was your relationship with them? So, because I know that.
We became friends. And they came over and they bought, Mary wanted, what was his name? Ebony Jet. He was a black horse. And she came over one day with Johnny, and they were looking at the stock. And she was out in the field, and all of a sudden she wanted to go home. And so they went home. Well, she said afterwards, he stepped on her foot and she was in pain. She was in terrible pain. Anyhow, they bought him, just not Ebony's yet. And then afterwards, a little girl from California bought him, and she campaigned him everywhere, and he won.
Smokey! Yeah.
And she was thrilled because we were out in California when there was a show on, and she was showing, and her horse won. And she was really thrilled that we were there to see him perform. Then, let's see, we had gone from the farm to New Mexico.
Yeah, well, tell me a little bit about tell me about the kids, like, so they got involved, how did they get involved in the horses and stuff, like, you know? Because they did pony
Well,
club.
Eric took to it right away. And we didn't have saddles for everybody. I mean, we were just starting out. And they would go riding bareback on the 2 ponies. And Eric would get dumped quite a bit, but he was persistent. And then Dad bred one of the ponies, and she died from it. So we had just 1 pony. Golden Girl and Golden Doll, their names were. And we had a lot of fun when we were in Dalton, Massachusetts, because we had that 7 acres. And people would stop and say, like Dick Street, we didn't know streets. And he stopped and said, if I buy a horse, can I put it in your barn? And Bill said, yeah, he's sublet. Then a girl came by and she said, I have a mare and foal, can I put her in your barn? And Bill said, yeah. And then Duffy, I think his name was Pat Duffy, he stopped, he had a jumper. He said, I have a jumper, can I put him in your barn? Pretty soon our barn was full. Between our horses and everybody's horses that wanted to come in. And then there was another girl, which was a friend of Marie's. She bought a horse that was a know-nothing horse, but he wasn't even good to ride. But she put him in our barn. So we had a barn full. And the people that owned the place, they were really thrilled with all of that. They liked all that activity. And it was the road to Vermont. The main road was right by that house. And cars would stop and line up and watch what was going on in that field. Because it was a busy, Pat Duffy, he'd be jumping, and the girl would be riding her mare that was in foal. Bill would be having he was voice commands with Trudor, and then he got buggies, and he hooked them up to buggies, and he was driving a buggy around. And Dick Street had his Western horse. He was riding his Western horse. I mean, it was fun. It was fun. Yeah. So then we went to New Mexico. Well, New Mexico, we showed the horses.
You brought the horses with you to New Mexico too?
We took 5 with us, and Eric took 5 to Stonecroft. Mary let him bring 5 into Stonecroft.
And how many years was it? What year was this in, do you know? 7? It was in the 70s?
It was early 70s. Yeah, it was early 70s when we moved to, and we had to pack up a farm to move. By then we had a tractor.
Were you pretty upset about having to leave?
I was in the beginning, yes, but once I finally decided I'd go out and look around, I fell in love with New Mexico, with Albuquerque. And then I didn't want to leave. But it was just Bill and me. And we went to one horse show showing 2 horses. It was a mess because I had to keep running up and asking them to hold the class because we would be in consecutive classes. Well, the show started at 7. So we load the horses in the 3-horse trailer that we had gotten from Gene Noble, whose husband owned the Scranton goods store in Scranton. And he went flying out of there. I remember we went across a railroad track and we never hit the railroad track. I mean, we went. So when we got there, we had 3 horses on. 3 horses had their legs from...
Are they all wobbly?
Well, they were bleeding.
Oh, really?
Yeah, right. And so, and then we got there and the show had started. So it was Commander, who was a quiet horse. It was 2 other horses. I can't think who the other 2 were. But anyhow, he could just tie them to the trailer. We didn't have a stall. And he would run those horses through, and they won. They won, and some fella came up to him and says, I guess that's the way you show horses. You run them you get them off the trailer, they have straw in their tails, and you run them in the glass, and you win, and you throw them back on the trailer, and that's about, that, I said to him, no more shows like that, no more. So we got home. Now the driveway, you were at the house, the driveway was this way and this way. So if you were going in New Mexico, the house, yeah, the driveway, and at the bottom was like a little creek. It wasn't very wide, it was a little creek. So you had to get a start. Here we had 3 horses on, pulling with a truck, and you had to get a start. Well, he got down the bottom and the trailer went this way. We got 3 horses on leaning. You couldn't unload them. No way you could unload them. So he said, I'll get the tractor and I'll pull, you get in the truck and I'll pull you up. You talk about being scared, because I was figured the tractor's going to go like this.
Yeah.
But he pulled us up and so he eased the tractor up the hill and got the trailer straightened out. How he did it, I don't know. He just pulled it and the trailer straightened out, and he unloaded the horses.
Pretty scary though. So you said
it was scary to me because I had to drive the truck.
And what time of day was it?
Night.
Night.
Pitch black. We were out in the country. There's no streetlights out in the country.
Must have been a little scary then.
It was scary. When that trailer went like this, that was, I thought, we're going to have to shoot every one of those horses. But anyhow, we were there. How long were we there?
Not long, right?
I can't remember how long we were there. And then we were going to sell the house. So we put the house up for sale. Well, the man that had first taken us to this house, we became friends with them, real estate woman, a real estate man and his wife. We became friends with them. And so when we went to sell, we called him to sell. I can't think how long we were there. And that was Louisville, Kentucky.
No, that was New Mexico, right?
That's what?
You're talking about New Mexico right there, weren't you?
No, I was talking about Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh, well, how long? So you were in New Mexico though. So how long were you in New Mexico then?
I think we went out around 71, and Bill came back and was back a year before I came back. I was out there with the 5 horses.
So New Mexico didn't last?
74. About 74 we came back.
So New Mexico didn't last that long then, really? It was kind of short-lived.
No, it didn't.
So then what did he do out there?
National Cash had come into General Electric. When you reach a certain point, companies can go in and look, and they can hire you out of your comfort zone, out of your company. So they had gone in and they wanted him. And they wanted him for National Cash Machines out in Albuquerque. And as a quality control man. So there again we went out. We bought a house on the top of a mountain. He built Bill built a barn, a U-shaped barn. And we took the 5 horses, and Eric kept 5 horses in Pennsylvania with him.
Yeah.
And the dogs, 3 dogs. We toured out there a lot, and when we first got out there, we just went up to Santa Fe and went Old Town, and I just fell in love with the whole mess. And Bill was not a sightseer, but he would sightsee out in New Mexico. Mm-hmm. And we became friends in Bernalillo with people that owned a jewelry store and afterwards it was a grocery store. But and then what happened? He went to a meeting in San Leandro with the plant manager, and the plant manager was telling them that these National Cash Machines were in Penny's and they were in Sears, and we've got the money for them. And on the plane back, Bill said, "How did you tell them that we've got money for machines that are not in the stores and they're not even built? How did you do that?" So Bill turned around and went back to San Leandro, California. Well, whistleblowers don't make out too well. So they gave him a year to find another job. So he connected with Ray Rissler, who was in Kentucky.
Did you guys meet him somewhere else?
Yeah, Bill, he was one of the 50 up on the mountain.
Oh. So what did they do in Scranton, do you know? After?
I never do. I never
Was it
knew.
like top secret or something?
No, I don't think so. But it was probably war originated somehow. Something they were doing, I guess. But
So
I don't think it was top secret. I just forgot. I just didn't talk about anything anymore because we just kept moving around.
Yeah.
So we came back to Columbia, Maryland. They were going to build 6 buildings. The mother company was Kentucky.
Okay.
The mother company was Kentucky. They were going to build 6 buildings, and Bill had to work in the Ranger building, which he said was very hard because he didn't have the setup he needed. He was to design and take the raw material through these machines he would design and put the raw material through, and they would come out a washer or a dryer on the other end. Well, Pittsfield was at that point starting to dry up, and they changed their mind. They built the Ranger building and I think one other building, but they decided against doing any more. So then they brought Bill back into Kentucky.
Okay.
So we were in Kentucky for a while.
What do you do in Kentucky, do you know?
Quality control. He was quality control wherever he went, which means it doesn't go out the door unless he okays it.
Yeah.
So, and I guess he was good.
And how long you guys there for?
Well, he retired from Kentucky.
Oh, really?
And he retired 1983, I think it was.